and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be putting together a handful of recipes to stock my fridge and freezer. It's a meal prep day. I like to do meal prep days probably about 2-3 days in a month. I make just a bunch of different recipes to throw into my fridge and freezer to help my future self out. So in today's video, I'm going to be making homemade sandwich bread, some sourdough bread. I want to try a new recipe out, a cinnamon sugar raisin bread. I'm also going to do, I think, French bread. And then I want to do some breakfast items. So I think I'm gonna do some muffins, a apple cinnamon sugar muffin with like a streusel topping. Sounds delicious, never made it before, but I think they're gonna be good. And then I also want to do a homemade soup. I have a mold that has individual portions that I can pour the soup into, freeze it, and then take them out as I need them, especially for my girls. My oldest loves soups. I think it'll be a great item to put in her lunches, and then also have on hand for cold and flu season. So I want to get that going, and then there might be a few other recipes in there I'm forgetting. I have everything written down. I already made up my sandwich loaf recipe. I made a video on this before already where I showed my recipe, how I put it together. I can link that above if you want to make this. So it's been resting. It's got to double in size. It'll be ready here in a bit, and then I'll put those together, and then I'm gonna get started right now on getting my sourdough in the oven. I put the dough together yesterday, so I didn't film that. I can make a separate video on that if you want to see all of that, but I will definitely share the recipe down below if you want to make the sourdough recipe. So I have my oven on at 450 degrees. I have 2 Dutch ovens in there heating up with the oven while it preheats. I'm going to get my loaves out and I'm going to score them and get those into the oven first, and then we'll get started on the rest of the recipe. Okay, so I'm gonna get the sourdough loaves out. I can make a separate video on this, like I said earlier. It's just a little bit of a process if you've ever made sourdough, so I just chose not to film it. And I put this together yesterday, so I fed my starter once it doubled in size. I put together my loaves. I did all of the stretching and folding yesterday, and then it's been resting in my fridge now overnight. So I have 2 sheets of parchment paper. I'm gonna flip them on. Completely ran out of parchment paper. I hate when that happens. I have a full day of baking that I want to do, and I'm probably gonna need my parchment paper, and I completely ran out. This was the last one. But I'm gonna get some flour on top and then rub that around. All right, so now that my sourdough loaves are scored and ready to go, I'm gonna get my Dutch ovens out of the oven. They're hot and ready to go. Something I started doing the last couple times I've made sourdough is adding rice to the bottom of my Dutch oven. My sourdough loaves used to come out really hard and kind of burnt on the bottom. They would be super hard to cut into, and so I was reading that if you add rice on the bottom, it helps, and it does. They still kind of have a little bit of a hard bottom, but not completely burned like they were coming out before. So I just add in a little bit of rice. And then I'm just gonna get my loaves into each one. All right, so I'm gonna get the lids on. My oven is preheating at 450 degrees, like I said earlier. So these are gonna bake with the lids on. I'm gonna get them in the oven. I'm gonna drop it down now to 400 degrees once I put them in the oven. They're gonna bake for the 20 minutes with the lid on, and then I'm gonna take the lid off after the 20 minutes, and they're gonna bake for another 20 minutes at 400 degrees also. Okay, so now that the sourdough is in the oven, I'm going to get my sandwich loaves put together. The dough is ready to go, so before I move on and make up, I think I'm gonna do the cinnamon raisin bread next. I wanna get this dough into my pans so they can rest in there for about an hour. So I like to measure out my sandwich loaves so I can have equal size loaves when I put them together into the pans. So I'm going to just get this measured out, this dough, and cut it in half. You don't have to measure these out if you don't want to. It's just all on preference. I'm just gonna flatten this out to about a rectangular shape like this, and then I'm gonna fold in one side, push it down with the palm of my hand into the dough, and then I'm gonna take both edges where it was folded, bring those in, push down with the palm of my hand, and then keep folding around. I just have my pans here. I'm gonna get that seam side down in the pan, and that one is ready to go. So I'm just gonna cover them loosely with a clean kitchen towel. So I'm just gonna put these off on the side next to my oven because they need to rest for about an hour in a warm place. My oven is on, so it's pretty warm over there. So that's perfect to let these rest and rise before I put them in the oven. So my sourdough loaves have been in the oven now for about 20 minutes. I need to take the lids off and they need to cook for another 20 minutes. No. So right now I'm gonna be making some homemade cinnamon raisin bread. So I need 1.5 cups of milk warmed up. So I have this on my stovetop to bring it to a slight boil, and then I'm gonna turn that off and it needs to cool off. I also have my yeast in here with warm water. This needs to sit for about 5 minutes. So it's been sitting for just a few now. It's gonna get all bubbly. And once these two items are ready to go, I'm gonna get my dough mixed up. All right, so my yeast mixture for my cinnamon raisin bread is ready to go. So I'm gonna get that into my bowl for the mixture. I'm also gonna add in my eggs. So I have 3 eggs. I'm gonna add in a cup of raisins. Also 1.25 cups of sugar. This is gonna make 3 loaves also, by the way. And then 1/2 cup of softened butter. I mix this up before I add in my flour. I also almost forgot, I wanna add in some vanilla. So I'm just gonna do a splash of vanilla. I'm also gonna add in a teaspoon of salt. And now I'm gonna add in 8 cups of flour. Oh, before I forget, I need my milk. So I have 1.5 cups of milk here. I'm gonna get this added in as well. Now I'm gonna add in the rest of my flour. 2. All right, so I mixed that up a good amount. So I'm gonna move this over to my mixer with my dough hook, and I'm gonna let it knead just for a few minutes. All right, so as I've been mixing this, it's still a little wet. So I've added in about 1/2 cup more of flour. I'm just trying to get this to come together so it's smooth and forms a ball. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of flour in at each time until I get that consistency. So my dough has been on my mixer kneading. It's still pretty wet. The recipe called for 8 cups of flour. I also added in about another 1/2 cup of flour while it was kneading. I'm going to actually now flip it out onto my surface and knead more flour into it. I like to do this so I can kind of get a feel of the dough as I'm adding the flour in, and that way I don't add too much flour. So I'm gonna flip it over and get some more flour and do a little bit more kneading before I let this rest. So the dough's ready to go. So I probably added in about 3/4 cup. Oh, that's my sourdough. Let me get that off. So I probably added in about 3/4 cup or even about a cup more of flour. So it was definitely still very wet. So it's just now at the point where I want it, just exactly where I want it. It's not sticky. I can poke my finger in, it's bouncing back. It's not sticking to my hands. So this is ready to go. I'm just gonna get this into a bowl and I'm gonna grease it a little bit and then let this rest in the bowl. So I just added in some olive oil. I'm gonna get this in and kind of flip it around a little bit so it gets greased up. And I'm just gonna cover this. It needs to rest for about an hour until it doubles in size. All right, so my sourdough loaves are done. I'm getting those out of the oven. They need to cool completely, but they look beautiful. I am so happy with them. Here's the other one. So I'm just gonna remove my loaves and get these onto some racks so they can cool completely. But I'm very happy with how they turned out. And see the bottom of them? The other time before I would put rice at the bottom of my Dutch ovens, they would come out so dark. So the rice technique really does work. next recipe I'm gonna get started on is my last bread recipe I wanna make for today, and it's gonna be French bread loaves. So I just have my yeast mixture here. It's ready to go. It's been sitting for about 5 minutes. It got all foamy. So there's just 2 cups of warm water. I added in 1 tablespoon of dry yeast and then 2.5 teaspoons of sugar. I'm gonna get this into my bowl. This is my bowl for my mixer. I'm just gonna add everything in and then move it over there to mix up. So I have my yeast mixture in here, and now I'm just gonna add in 2 cups of flour to start. I'm gonna add in more as it's mixing, but I'm just gonna start with 2 cups. And then now I'm gonna add in 2.5 teaspoons of salt. All right, so now I'm just gonna get this on my mixer. I'm gonna start getting it mixed up, and then I'm gonna start adding in flour about 1/2 cup at a time until I get to about 4 or 5 cups of flour. All right, so now that that's all incorporated, it's still very runny. I'm gonna add in about 1/2 cup of flour and mix, and I'm gonna keep adding in about 1/2 cup of flour until it forms a dough ball. All right, so I added in 5 cups of flour. It's been kneading for a little bit, so I'm just gonna remove this and get it into a greased bowl and cover it, and it's gonna rest for about an hour. So the next recipe I'm gonna move on to is apple cinnamon streusel muffins. So I'm just getting all of my ingredients lined up. I'm gonna need a cup of apple. I have Honeycrisp apple here. I'm gonna take the skin off, and then I'm gonna dice it up into really small pieces. And then I also have butter over on the stovetop that I'm melting. I need a 1/4 cup of butter. I'm gonna let that melt and then cool before I get everything mixed up. And first, before I get started on the muffins, my sandwich loaves are ready to get into the oven. I just got it preheated to 360 degrees. I'm gonna get these into the oven, and they're gonna bake for 40 minutes. So I'm just dicing these into really small pieces, as you can see here. You can grate them with a cheese grater if you want to do it that way. I'm choosing not to do it that way. I want a little bit more of a chunky apple in my muffins, so I'm just gonna dice these up pretty small. So I think this muffin is gonna be a great muffin to keep in the freezer for fall. With the streusel topping. I think my girls are going to love these. I haven't made these before. I think I already said that, so this will be my first time doing a muffin like this. So I'm excited to see how they turn out. All right, so my butter is cooled and my apple is diced up. So I'm just gonna get everything into my bowl here. I need 1.5 cups of flour, 1/2 cup of milk. I also have my melted butter here, so I'm gonna add that in. That's a 1/4 cup. I'm also gonna add in 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then I'm gonna add in about 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then lastly, I'm gonna add in my diced up apple here. It's about 1 cup, and I'm just gonna get this mixed up. Now that my batter for my muffins is mixed up, I'm gonna get the streusel topping mixed up. So I'm gonna add in a 1/4 cup of softened butter. And to this, I'm gonna add in a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of white sugar, and then about 1/2 cup of flour. And then I'm gonna add in about 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. Now I'm just gonna mix this up with a fork. I might get in there with my hands. I always kind of do that with my streusel, just to kind of incorporate it all. I love muffins with streusel toppings, so I'm excited to try these ones out. Okay, so the recipe for these is actually doing them as regular size muffins, but I'm going to make them into mini muffins. That way I'll get more of them. And then because these are for my girls mostly, mini muffin size is perfect for them. So I just have a cookie scoop here, and I sprayed my pan really well with some olive oil spray. So I'm just gonna scoop these in and get the streusel topping on top. All right, so I put all of the streusel on these. I like a lot of streusel, so I put a good pile on top of each of these muffins. And then now I'm just kind of pushing the streusel into the muffin batter a little bit so it'll stick a little better. So my oven is set at 360 right now. The sandwich loaves are still in there baking. So my mini muffins are done and ready to go. So these are supposed to bake at 375. As large muffins, they're supposed to bake for about 20 minutes. I'm gonna start them at 360 and I'm gonna do them for 12 to 15 minutes to start and then kind of go from there and see if they need to bake any longer than that. So I'm gonna get them in with the sandwich loaves right now. So my sourdough loaves are cooled. They came out so good. I love a good sourdough loaf. And so what I like to do with these, I freeze these. So I will cut these in half and I'll freeze them that way. And then I just take out half at a time because my husband and I are usually the only ones that will eat the sourdough loaves. My girls like that sourdough bread, but they tend to go for the sandwich bread over the sourdough. And so I've learned over time that sometimes my husband and I can't eat a whole loaf fast enough, so it'll mold. And I don't want to waste my sourdough loaves. So I've learned to cut them in half and then do it that way. And so my favorite way of eating the sourdough is I will cut off a slice, I'll toast it, and then I'll take avocado, like half of an avocado, and then mix it with some lemon juice and salt and pepper, and I'll put that on the toasted sourdough, and it is so good. So I'm going to get these sliced into halves, into Ziploc bags. I'm gonna put one in the fridge. That's where I store my sourdough when we're eating it. It lasts longer when I keep it in the fridge versus on my countertop. And then I'm gonna put the rest of them in my freezer. All right, the dough for my French bread loaves is ready to go. It's been resting for about an hour. You can let this rest for about 30 minutes, but if you can do an hour, it's better that way. But it'll come out fine if you let it rest for just 30 minutes. I'm gonna flour my surface here and divide this into 2 balls. I'm just gonna roll this out into kind of a rectangular shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to roll it into kind of a log. So when I get to the halfway point, as I'm rolling, I'm gonna take the ends and kind of tuck those in and then keep rolling into the log. So then you kind of get the French bread shape. So I'm just gonna get this onto my cookie sheet that I have lined with parchment paper, and I'm gonna roll out the other one now. So these need to rest and rise for about 30 to 60 minutes. I'm going to take a little razor and cut 3 lines into the dough. I'm gonna loosely cover it with a towel and set this up on the side so it can rest. All right, my sandwich loaves are done. The timer just went off. I'm gonna get those out so they can cool. And then my muffins are looking good. I'm gonna move these though up here and let these bake for just a few more minutes. All right, my muffins are done. They look really good and they smell delicious. So I'm gonna let those cool completely before I remove them. All right, so now my raisin cinnamon bread is done. Look at that. It's been resting for more than an hour. It's doubled in size, so I'm gonna punch it down. This is gonna make 3 loaves. So you have 2 options. You could roll this out as one large dough, put the cinnamon sugar in it, roll it up like in a log, and then cut it into 3 equal logs. I'm gonna separate it though, because I don't wanna do that. My workspace isn't that large. So I'm gonna do 3 separate loaves, roll those out, put the cinnamon sugar in each one, and then do it that way. So I'm gonna punch this down, flour my surface. I could measure this, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna cut it into 3 different dough balls. All right, so I'm gonna roll each one of these out. I mixed up 3/4 cup of sugar with 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. And once I roll these out, I'm gonna sprinkle this on. I'm gonna brush it with a little bit of milk, and then just to kind of moisten the dough. And then I'm gonna sprinkle this over and then roll them up. So I just have a little bit of milk here. I'm gonna brush this on, And also I forgot to mention, I dropped my oven down to 350 because it was at 360 for the sandwich loaves, but these need to bake at 350. So I dropped that down. And then I'm gonna sprinkle the cinnamon sugar on top of the milk. And then I'm just gonna roll these into a log. Halfway, I'm going to bring in my edges, kind of pinch those down. So there's one ready to go. Get it into my bread pan, put that off on the side. I'm gonna roll out the others. So these need to rest for another hour, so I'm just gonna loosely cover them with my kitchen towel, clean kitchen towel, and set these off on the side and let them rest before I bake them. All right, so my French bread has been resting. This is ready to go. I'm gonna get these into my oven and let these bake for about 20 to 23 minutes, and my oven's set at 350. So the muffins are on a cooling rack. They've cooled completely. My daughter and I, my 3-year-old Cheyenne and I, we split one together. So good, and she gave it 2 thumbs up for those muffins. So these are gonna go into a large Ziploc bag and they'll freeze perfectly. So when I pull out a muffin out of my freezer and I want to defrost it for the morning for my girls for breakfast, I put them in my microwave at about 70% power, and I let them cook for about 30 or so seconds. And I do that in increments until they're fully defrosted and then warmed up a little bit. And then I'll probably put a little bit of butter on these, serve them with some eggs, some scrambled eggs, and some fruit in the morning. And these are gonna be perfect for those busy, hectic mornings. All right, my French bread is done. They turned out great. I love this recipe. It's just so easy to make these. It's actually pretty quick, even with the resting time, and they come out so good and they freeze perfectly. So my cinnamon raisin breads are ready to go. They look great already. So I'm gonna get these in the oven. My oven's set at 350 degrees, like I said earlier, and these are gonna bake for about 45 minutes until they're golden brown. All right, so now that the cinnamon raisin bread is in the oven, I'm gonna get started on my next recipe. So I wanna make a homemade soup. Like I said earlier, I'm gonna do chicken noodle soup. I have everything lined up. I'm gonna use the chicken stock that I had made a few weeks ago that I had in my freezer. I made it homemade. I did a video on it. I'll link it either above or down below. If you want to make your own homemade chicken stock, it's super easy. I also have a pack of rotisserie chicken that I pulled out of my freezer that's gonna go into this soup. And I have some vegetables that I wanted to use up, so that's kind of why I decided to do chicken noodle soup. I have celery and carrots and things that I wanna use up before they go bad. So I'm gonna get started on that. And what I'm gonna do is I decided to do individual portions for this soup that I'm gonna freeze them in. So I have these molds that I'm going to pour the soup into. I have 2 of them, and then they also come with lids. I'll link these in down below if you want to order these. I got them off of Amazon. So I'm gonna pour the soup in these once the soup is cooled, and then pop this in my freezer, pop them out when they're fully frozen, and put them into a large Ziploc bag. And then this will just be an easy way to put together soup for lunch or a quick dinner. My 7-year-old likes homemade soup, so she likes to take it to school with her for lunch. So I thought that would be an easy way to heat up some soup to pop into her thermos to take to school for lunch. So let's get started on the soup recipe. Okay, so here's everything that I'm gonna put into my chicken noodle soup. So like I said, I had carrots and celery that I wanna use up before they go bad. I have an onion. I'm gonna use probably about 1/4 or so of this onion. And then some garlic. I have rotisserie chicken. This is my chicken stock that I had in my freezer that I defrosted. I'm probably gonna need a little bit more chicken stock, so I might just use what I have in my pantry for that. And then I've done chicken noodle soup with egg noodles, but I decided to use these noodles, and I'm just gonna throw those into it. And then I'm gonna put in parsley, basil, and then I always like to put ginger into my chicken noodle soup. I love fresh ginger, but I don't have that on hand right now. So I'm gonna put a dash of some of this powdered ginger, and then I also have some butter back here that I'm gonna saute the vegetables in along with some olive oil, and then salt and pepper, of course. All right, so I have celery, carrots, and onion that I need to get chopped up. So let's get these chopped up for the soup. All right, so I have about a cup of each of these for the soup. So I'm gonna get some olive oil and about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of butter in my pot and get that heated up and melted down. And then I'm gonna get these in there and saute them. All right, so I'm gonna cook these vegetables for about 3 to 4 minutes until they soften up, the onion gets translucent, and then I'll start adding in the rest of my ingredients. All right, so now that the vegetables have been cooking for a little bit, I'm gonna add in my chicken. So like I said, this is just rotisserie chicken. You can do chicken breast that you can cook and then shred up or dice up. I'm just gonna add in a couple tablespoons of garlic. I'm also gonna add in a few teaspoons of salt. And then a few teaspoons of pepper. Next, I'm gonna add in about a teaspoon of basil, and then a teaspoon of parsley. And then now I'm gonna add in, I don't know, about a 1/4 teaspoon of ginger, maybe half a teaspoon. All right, so this part's optional. I wanna get the brown bits on the bottom of this pan, so I'm gonna add in some cooking sherry and scrape the pan. So that's all added flavor. And then I'm just gonna let that cooking sherry kind of cook down a little bit. And then I'm gonna add my broth in next. Now I'm gonna add my broth. All right, so I need more chicken stock in this. So I'm gonna add a can of some chicken broth. And then I'm also gonna add in about a cup of water. All right, I'm just gonna stir this up and then bring it to a boil, and then I'm gonna add my noodles in next. My cinnamon raisin bread is done. Oh, that got really done on the top. That's okay. All right, so those look good. They got a little well done on the top. I'm still learning. My oven is somewhat new. I feel like it always runs a little bit hotter than other people's ovens because I'll follow directions and I'll cook my items for the amount of time that recipes will say, and things come out a little bit more done than I think they should. So I should have bumped it down to about 40 minutes versus 45 minutes. But I think these will still be delicious. So I'm just gonna get these loaves onto my rack to get them to cool. Oh, the bottoms of them look really good. They smell so good. Yeah, the bottom, great. And then what I'm gonna do is just kind of add a little bit of some butter on top. So I just have a couple tablespoons here. I'm gonna just rub along the top. So my soup is cooling on the stove here behind me. So the last item I'm gonna get ready now is buttermilk pancakes. So I'm going to do some in my mini muffin tin so they can kind of do like pancake dippers. Then I'm gonna add probably some sprinkles and chocolate chips in some of them. And then what's left, I'll just do regular pancakes with. So this is the last recipe. I'm pretty tired and burnt out with all of this, but I'm gonna try to power through to get this done because I wanna use up this buttermilk. I wanna get these made and in the freezer. So let's get started on this last recipe. All right, so we have a change of plans. My buttermilk was already done. It was past its expiration date and wasn't good. So I ended up having to dump the rest of that, which was unfortunate. So I'm gonna change up the recipe I'm doing, and I'm just gonna make good old-fashioned pancakes. And so here's everything I'm gonna use. I have flour, sugar, I have melted butter, milk, baking powder, 1 egg, and then salt. I'm gonna mix this all up, and then I'm going to top these muffin pancake dippers with sprinkles and chocolate chips and kind of just wing it. So let's get this all mixed up. So in my large bowl, I'm gonna add in 1.5 cups of flour. Now I'm gonna add in 3.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Now I'm gonna add in 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar. Next I'm gonna add in 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm just gonna kind of mix up these dry ingredients, get those all incorporated, and now I'm gonna add in 1.25 cup of milk. Next I'm gonna add in my melted butter. So this is 3 tablespoons of melted butter. And lastly, I'm gonna add in 1 egg. I'm gonna mix this all up. So I just have my mini muffin pan here. I sprayed it really well with some olive oil spray. And I'm just gonna pour this pancake mix right into these, and then I'm gonna add my toppings. All right, so that pancake mix fit perfectly in this pan. There was nothing left. So I'm gonna do some with sprinkles, some with chocolate chips, and then some plain. I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees too right now for these. I had turned it off earlier, forgetting that I was gonna do these. So I have that going now. So I'm just gonna mix everything into these with just a little toothpick. Okay, so my mini muffin pancake dippers are ready to go. I have my oven preheating right now to 350 degrees. Once that's done, these are gonna go in the oven and they're gonna cook for 15 to 20 minutes. I'm gonna start them at 15 and then add on if I need to. So my soup is pretty cooled off, so I'm going to get it into these molds, get the lids on, and get these into the freezer. Those are done. I'm just gonna get these in my freezer. Once they're fully frozen, I'm gonna pop them out and put them into a big Ziploc bag. All right, these are done. I'm gonna let these cool, then remove them and let them cool even more on a rack. And then I'm gonna put them into a big Ziploc bag and get them into my freezer.